My dad was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer when I was 28 years old and passed away 9 months later. He was 59. In the prime of his life, working two businesses 18 hours a day, but starting to travel 3 times per year with my mom, getting ready to slow down and start enjoying life. And then he was gone. 8 months before I got married, and he never met his grandkids. And he would have been an awesome grandpa. Why am I telling you this? Because I believe sharing this deeply personal story will tell you more about me as a person. It will not only help you understand who I am, but why I do what I do in this channel, trying to empower like-minded, ordinary people like you to be the best version of yourself. In this video, I'll not only go through my journey as the oldest child in my family and the burden of responsibility I carried on my shoulders running our family business, but also how this painful experience shaped who I am today. So I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about my dad because I think it gives a bit of perspective. Dad was an immigrant. He came here from China when he was 10 years old, spoke not a word of English. Of course, he's put in school. The stories I hear is that he made it through grades 1 through 6 elementary school as a 10-year-old in a few years, and then attended junior high and high school until he quit when he was 16, because of course you're allowed to do that when you're 16. He wanted to get a job, so he managed to get a job pushing a broom in a print shop. That led, obviously, to him eventually, I guess he convinced the owners to send him to school. When I say print shop, I mean like printing presses, dark rooms photography. So he became a pressman. And he worked that for years and years and years until there was finally a chance to buy the business. I mean, this is truly an America's success story, at least from my young eyes, right? Now, this business, Empire Printers, actually included a newspaper, the Jewish Post. So as an Asian, my dad was business partners with his partner Harold until Harold passed away. And then, of course, my dad bought both businesses and became the sole shareholder. So now my dad owns a print shop and this Jewish newspaper as a Chinese businessman. It's quite funny. So two businesses there. And then in the early 1980s, he had an opportunity to buy back into our family Chinese restaurant. That's another story, but it had been in the family for since the 1950s. So now he's got three businesses. And so I saw him from the time I was 10, 12 years old, working from 8 to 5 at the print shop. And then he went to the restaurant every evening. I never saw my dad during the day. And, you know, obviously as a family, we stopped eating suppers together around the table. And then during that time, my mom was a piano teacher. So she's teaching piano. So I basically came home from school, walked home from high school, 4 o'clock. Dinner was sort of waiting in a casserole or a crock pot or something like that. And I would just eat on my own. Same with my sister. I could hear my mom teaching piano and dad was at the restaurant. So something though changed in my dad's in his 50s. You know, he's running the restaurant for 10 years. He's making enough money to afford, again, they bought a nice motorhome. They began taking longer trips. I was old enough by this time to begin driving as, my job as a Chinese food delivery driver. And then a few years later, responsibility to close up the restaurant, around 1 a.m. so that he could go home in the early evenings. But here's the thing. My dad smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day for as long as I was alive. I mean, secondhand smoke in the car growing up, disgusting yellow film on the inside of the window. Myself and my sister probably secondhand smoked a pack a day ourselves. So fast forward a few years, when he was 56 years old, he found a lump at the side of his throat. He couldn't swallow. He even had trouble breathing. So of course, and I'm glossing over a bit of this, and you guys can imagine how scary that is. X-rays, multiple doctor's appointments, finding a lump, eventually getting a biopsy, not knowing exactly what it was, and eventually admitted to the hospital in the middle of the night but a blessing. It turned out to be a large abscess, so the doctors were able to drain it, a long course of antibiotics, and he recovered. But it changed my dad. 3 packs of cigarettes a day. Obviously, you guys know that in my past video, I was talking about life scares and what it does to you and the promises you make to yourself. I'm sure this was going through his head because he thought he had throat cancer from smoking. He talked about it a little bit, but he was still, as large in life as he was and charismatic, he was still very private. He never talked about his feelings too much. So I think that he was scared that he had throat cancer. Maybe he made some promises to himself to quit smoking. And that's exactly what he did. As soon as he was good enough and healthy enough, he just stopped smoking. He quit cold turkey. He had this routine where he'd keep his cigarettes in his pocket here, and he would take them out, and he would do that thing with his hands that smokers do. So he took to keeping a pack of raisins here, and every time he would have the urge to smoke, he would take the pack out, pop out a raisin. But of course, that ended up giving him some onset diabetes later in life. I mean, what can you do? So he started living life with more meaning. He was more purposeful. He started taking trips to Las Vegas each year with my mom. Yes, they were gamblers. And then two to three times per year, knowing him and my mom were going to carve out a life where they could slow down and travel. I'm going to take a short bit of a break here, commercial break, if you will. I post these videos to help people, and this is the only thing I'm ever going to ask of you. In order to inspire others with my story, I need to grow the channel, and that happens only when people subscribe. So if you're still watching this here with me, listening to this story, just take a moment to hit that subscribe button on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, right down there, and help put this video and others in front of other people. That's it. That's my only ask. You don't have to buy anything. Just click right there. Thank you. Okay, where was I? Right. So mom and dad traveling a few times per year, trying to be more purposeful, to enjoy life, and then a persistent cough. And it wouldn't go away. So same kind of thing as before a few years ago. Doctor, x-rays, but then they saw something in his lung. So multiple back and forth, finally get a biopsy. But this time, he's not so lucky. It's cancer. And for those of you who have been through this journey, either yourself or with family members and loved ones, you wait with bated breath for physiology results. What type of cancer? Can it be treated? Will it need chemo, radiation, both? So we wait a couple of weeks for the lab results and then drive to the hospital as a family to meet with the doctor. And it's what we feared. Small cell carcinoma, one of the most aggressive types of lung cancers. I have my theories about it, and I always thought, why would this have happened when he quit smoking a good 3 years before, right? Small cell carcinoma in lung cancer is typically associated with smokers. It is one of the most aggressive forms, as I said, but he quit smoking. So with my science background, and this is just a theory, I'm not a doctor, I believe that being in the printing business, you use a lot of harsh chemicals in the print shop. Solvents, you're in the dark room developing negatives. Ammonias, your eyes would water in that dark room. I remember as a young kid being in there. And then, of course, you're constantly cleaning off these inks, printing ink, which is also bad. It smells, with all of these really harsh solvents. So I believe that all of those chemicals stripped away the protective lining. I believe that the smoking stripped away the protective lining of the lung. And then, so even though he had stopped smoking, it takes years to rebuild that protective layer. And I believe it was the chemicals then that caused the cancer. Again, that's just my theory. So now he has another biopsy to determine if it spread to his lymph nodes. Okay. And we wait. And again, more bad news. It's spread. stage 4 lung cancer. So he goes through chemo and he's sick, like really sick. And I'm not going to talk about that part because it's not appropriate for this video. But after chemo and more hope, then he starts experiencing dizziness and headaches. And then his right arm began having the shakes. So now we go in for an MRI. And more bad news. It spread to his brain. So he starts to go through a course of radiation. Now, as the oldest child in our family, it's just the two of us, myself and my sister. My sister's already moved to Toronto. I mean, we're in our late 20s. Literally, the burden of the family is on my shoulders, and it's hard because you go through your own thoughts and yet you want to be strong. I'm trying to be the optimist, the strength, the word of hope. Then I'm running the restaurant at night, hospital visits. I mean, it's super busy. But you guys know that I have a science background, master's in molecular biology, and I'm reading the literature. I'm reading journals, medical journals. I knew what was coming. I mean, I could see what the prognosis of small cell carcinoma was. But still pasting a smile on my face every single day, saying things, you can do this, be strong, don't give up. So here's my daily routine for a couple of months. I would drive to the hospital before work for a quick visit, work all day at the lab, run the restaurant in the evening. On my way home, I'd sneak into the hospital for another quick visit, maybe sneak my dad some soup or something that was his favorite. And then somehow being a real estate investor and collecting rents, doing small repairs for the 5 rental properties we owned at the time. And then doing the same thing when he was at home intermittently from the hospital. And you guessed, I eventually gave myself an ulcer. And to this day, I'm on medication for acid reflux. So I'm going to skip ahead again a little because this is too painful, but eventually he was admitted again to the hospital. He ended up sharing a room with a patient that had pneumonia and then died 3 weeks later of pneumonia. I was fortunate enough to be there with my wife, Lisa, fiance at the time, and my mother. And we watched him take his last breath. Only 8 months after the first diagnosis. And to this day, I consider it a blessing that it was a complication with pneumonia that actually took him, because I think we had a lot of more hard days ahead, despite the fact we had so little time with him. And I think he had more suffering ahead. So I'm trying to be an optimist and say it was a blessing. So I'm 28. My dad, my inspiration, my hero, my friend, my golfing partner, my fishing buddy, gone. Lisa and I got married 8 months later. And 2 years after that, my son Nathan was born. And 2 years after that, my other son Evan was born. I have 2 kids. When I think of life being not fair, and I know that my dad used to say everything happens for a reason, I really question sometimes. It really makes you think, because my dad was larger than life. Everybody loved him. I mean, at his funeral, standing room only. The people that he affected, the good that he did in his life, it was just inspiring. And he would have been an awesome grandpa, spoiling my kids. I mean, he was into golfing, fishing, hockey, the Winnipeg Jets, my goodness. We lived fairly close to my mom right now when she's not snowbirding in the US. And I don't doubt that my dad would be constantly over taking my kids somewhere or going on trips together. But life is supposed to go on, right? As painful as this was, but I think my biggest regret is not the time that I didn't get to spend with him, but the fact that my two boys weren't able to know their grandpa. All right. What did I learn from this? Motivation, obviously, learning that life is too short. So I think I'm 28. when he passed away. And I think it did change me. It caused me, I had those 5 rental properties. I was having at a crossroads in my life. I wasn't sure I wanted to be in science anymore. I wasn't happy at the lab, even though it was a government unionized paid job with full pension and benefits. So life's too short, right? How do I get there? With these rental properties, I knew that that was one of the things I enjoyed doing. I enjoyed being a scientist too. So I started buying more and more rental properties. Was able to quit my career job 7 years later for good. But here's the twist. The last video that I recorded, I spoke about my journey with my own second chance, a false potential diagnosis with only 4 months to live, and then almost drowning in a boating accident. So if my dad passed away so young, and I was motivated to do all of this because of his passing and live life to the fullest, why was I working so hard when this happened to me as well? So to you that are watching, it seemed I didn't learn those lessons either. And I didn't. And that's what my main message is here for you today. We are shaped by our experiences, but do we really learn? Because I didn't. Yes, losing my dad at such a young age, I was inspired to become an entrepreneur, but inspiration can only take you so far. What I didn't learn was balance. The act of working hard, but still keeping the reason you're working so hard in front of you to ensure that you're not focusing so much on something in the distance that you would forget to enjoy the journey of trying to get there with those you love, with those that are important to you. And most of all, being true to yourself and to enjoy the little things in life. So if you're in business or you're trying to start a business or you're thinking of starting a business, I hope my story inspires you to greatness. But remember to keep enjoying what you have today, not tomorrow, because you never know how much time you have left.